You say you want love. You say you want a connection. And yet, when someone gets too close, too curious, too kind, something inside you recoils. Your chest tightens, your words retreat, and your tone sharpens into something colder than you meant. You watch yourself start to withdraw, and yet you can't stop it. You see the confusion in their eyes, that subtle moment when warmth meets the unspoken chill of rejection, and you hate that you did it, but it's the only thing that feels safe. It's a cruel kind of irony. The same instincts that once kept you safe are now the ones that make you lonely. This is the paradox of self-protection. The act of building walls so thick they begin to echo. You learned long ago that people leave, or that their love came with conditions. So you built a system, an internal firewall. You taught yourself restraint, silence, distance. Connection became an equation too expensive to afford. The body memorizes what the mind tries to forget. Each time you were met with rejection in your formative years, when your emotions were too heavy, your needs too much, your presence unseen, your nervous system took notes. It recorded a single rule: closeness equals pain. And so even now, as an adult desperate for intimacy, safety still looks like solitude. You find yourself chasing connection like a starving person who flinches at food, wanting it, needing it, yet unable to receive it without fear of the burn. Because what saved you was emotional independence, control, and stoicism. But now, it suffocates you. The quiet tragedy is that you're not afraid of love. You're afraid of losing yourself in it again. What you're experiencing has a name, several, actually. The most recognized term is avoidant attachment, a style first outlined in John Bowlby's attachment theory. It forms when care or affection in childhood was inconsistent, conditional, or overwhelming. Instead of reaching out, you learned to retreat. You don't stop needing love, you just stop trusting its stability. Underneath that, many carry the residue of emotional neglect, not necessarily cruelty, but absence. A parent preoccupied with their pain, distracted, unavailable. You learned to self-regulate early, to soothe yourself, to shrink your needs. But that hyper-independence is a kind of chronic vigilance in disguise. That brings us to hypervigilance, the brain's trauma-born tendency to scan constantly for threat, even in peace. It's a nervous system programmed for unpredictability. You may not realize it, but you're perpetually braced for loss, disappointment, or emotional intrusion. The default mode network, the brain's region tied to self-referential thought, gets hijacked by scenarios of what could go wrong. Every moment of potential closeness becomes an internal simulation of rejection. Neuroscientifically, when someone with avoidant tendencies approaches intimacy, the amygdala, your brain's threat detector, lights up. Cortisol spikes. The body confuses emotional exposure with physical danger. That's why affection makes you restless, why silence feels safer than sincerity. Your brain has wired warmth as a trigger, not a bomb. It isn't a lack of empathy. It's a learned survival algorithm, one that equates control with safety and vulnerability with annihilation. Moreover, as adult responsibilities compound and the stakes of vulnerability rise, many unconsciously resort to parentification. This dynamic often involves assuming emotional burdens far too early, effectively becoming the caretaker rather than the cared for. The interplay of these psychological constructs forms a tangled web, where symptoms manifest as a complex coping strategy rather than innate personality traits. The very mechanisms that once served to protect your heart now imprison it. But here's the tragedy. Safety isn't the same as peace. Avoidance doesn't just guard you from pain, it also guards you from joy. You've armored your heart so completely that tenderness ricochets off it. You want to be known, truly known. But the moment someone starts seeing through your layers, you change the subject, retreat into logic, or find fault. You ghost, not out of cruelty, but out of defense. There's a line by Carl Jung that says, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." This is the quiet ache of emotional self-abandonment, the pain of performing strength when what you crave is to be held. You've become fluent in self-sufficiency, but illiterate in dependence. You confuse openness with exposure, and exposure with danger. You call your detachment standards your distance independence, your apathy peace. But beneath it all lies grief, the grief of the child who learned that love would cost too much. This is the cost of unhealed vigilance. You live in emotional exile, surrounded by people yet untouched by connection. You crave someone to understand your silence, but when they try, you pull away, afraid they'll see the depth of your longing. That longing is shameful to you because, once upon a time, it made you vulnerable to pain. And so the fear isn't of loneliness. It's of re-experiencing helplessness, that unbearable memory of needing, asking, and being met with absence. These fears twist life's simplest moments into tangled knots of overthinking. Inviting a friend over transforms into an orchestration of anxiety. What if they see through the facade? What if they judge you? Perhaps deep inside rests the profound truth. Your fear of judgment stems not from others, but from the inner critic that belittles your very essence. The irony here is stark. The quest for belonging is subverted by the belief that you do not belong. In adulthood, this pattern wears many disguises. You might become the person who ends relationships first, before anyone else has the chance to disappoint you. You preemptively leave, so you can call it strength instead of abandonment. You might chase unavailable people, because they let you reenact the emotional distance you be. Always known safe in its familiarity, safe in its inevitable failure. You might lose interest when someone becomes too kind, too present, too real. Because somewhere deep down, kindness feels suspicious, like the calm before chaos. In your career, you might overwork to prove you need no one. Success becomes a spiritual substitute for intimacy. It's the only metric that feels safe to chase. You may find that boundaries become barricades. Where others express needs naturally, you silently judge yourself for even having them. Vulnerability feels like a transaction you can't afford. And inside stillness, in those quiet Sunday moments when everything should feel fine, that's when the emptiness floods in. Because rest, too, feels unsafe. The nervous system that survived chaos doesn't trust calm. But these behaviors are not personality traits. They are coping strategies, the traces of trauma woven into identity. And the first act of healing isn't to try to fix them, but to witness them. To notice when you pull away, when you minimize, when you intellectualize love as a problem to solve instead of an emotion to feel. The most painful reality is that you witness the patterns unfolding in your life. But in moments of clarity, you gaslight yourself, minimizing the pain or defending your walls as necessary. It's a battle to acknowledge that your coping strategies are defenses built on quicksand. They don't solidify you. They simply keep you from sinking deeper into connection. You cannot outthink loneliness. You can only outfeel it by learning to stay. Stay with yourself. Stay with discomfort. Stay when love starts feeling too close. Healing avoidance is not a matter of suddenly letting someone in. It's the slow, sacred process of reparenting the part of you that believed love was unsafe. It begins with inner child work, learning to speak to the frightened version of you, the one who assumed necessity meant invisibility. You learn to say, "I see you, and you are safe now," because your nervous system doesn't heal through logic. It heals through consistency and self-trust. Renowned philosopher Rainer Maria Rilke once said, "The only journey is the one within." As you navigate this multifaceted path towards healing, remember that your ultimate goal is not a false narrative of being fixed, but rather the reclamation of your wholeness. Be gentle with yourself. You are learning, unlearning, and blossoming into the light of connection you crave. Shadow work follows, exploring the parts of you that flinch at affection, the parts that find silence comforting, and the ones that equate distance with dignity. The goal isn't to eradicate them, but to understand them. They protected you once. Gratitude, not condemnation, rewires the defensive instinct. You relearn connection slowly, through soft, safe exposure. Sharing something small, asking for help, letting someone see you without your armor. Each tiny act begins to teach your body a new equation. That closeness can coexist with safety. Philosopher Alan Watts once said, "The more a thing tends to be permanent, the more it tends to be lifeless." The same applies to your walls. They promise stability, but locked out vitality. Real connection, like real life, requires risk, mess, and the courage to remain imperfectly open. The healing is never about becoming fearless. It's about becoming willing. Willing to risk the ache of connection for the chance at sincerity. Willing to hold space for both affection and fear without retreat. So when you feel yourself pulling away again, pause. Realize that the impulse is not betrayal. It's a memory, and you have the power now to choose differently. Because the goal was never to be untouchable. It was to finally be able to touch the world and not flinch. You're not broken for wanting distance. You're healing for noticing it. And the fact that you long for connection, even after all the hurt, is proof that your humanity never died. It just waited for you to feel safe enough to return. In closing, let this video serve as a gentle reminder. Connection isn't a risk. It's a homecoming. You are allowed to be seen, to be heard, to be real. As you forge deeper connections with yourself, you will discover that the fortress you built can also transform into an open door, welcoming in all that you once thought unattainable. If you want more content that explores the psychology behind your patterns and the silent agreements you never realized you made, please like and share this with someone who could benefit from it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't have to navigate this inner work alone. Remember, the goal isn't to fix you. It's to help you feel whole at last.